let's talk about the main topic at hand. I think uh, what I want to highlight is how important water is. So what this is last 30 years or so of crop insurance data from risk management agency, and they went back and put all the dollars together, put together that have been paid out into crop insurance payments in that time period between 1990 and 2024. And if you look at the largest slices of this pie, the two largest slices of this pie are drought and high temperature, about $90 billion, and then excess moisture, another $52 billion. If you add these two together, that's about 70% of risk that has been paid out for that is related to water. And that kind of blows my mind. We take it for granted when we are farming day to day. We don't think about the largest component of the risk that we carry, which is the water. We don't think about it because we have tile drainage in a way. But I like to have this slide because this kind of justifies me being employed. Okay, that's the main purpose of this. But yes, I agree that nobody can argue against this. Water is the most limiting factor and carries the biggest risk. In Ohio, we have kind of a weird situation. So this is that same crop insurance data by states. The top right corner is Ohio, and the blue is that excess moisture stress, and the red is the drought stress. Now we're in a tile drainage country, and you might think that that entire bar should have been blue, but that's not true. And that's the only thing I wanted to point out is the fact that we do have uh, almost half of our risk related to water is still drought, which we tend to ignore uh, many of the years because that red part is maybe a couple years in a decade. The blue part is every year, every spring you got to deal with it. There are some springs and summers when it gets too much, and then you have to rely on crop insurance payments. All right. You guys know that we get about 40 inches of rain in Ohio. That's the main reason why we need drainage, because we do have too much water. Our April to June crop progress is all dominated by like wet weather, delayed planting, and things like that. Justifies having tile drainage. We don't have to get too much into it. What we don't necessarily think about is how much precipitation or liquid water we get in non-growing season. So look at this, November to April, you're getting about half of your year's worth of precipitation. We get about 40 inches, almost 20 inches comes between that November and April, and we have just too much water sitting there, no evaporation. And that's the reason why we have to get rid of a lot of that water. Out of that 20 inches that falls in, about 10 inches goes straight out of the tile outlet during that time period. So we discharge about 10 inches just during this time period. Um, but then I'm gonna skip over this. You all know the importance of drainage, and you've seen this, Jason, last year probably at my presentation. So we know the importance of drainage. I think I quizzed you guys last time about this. Where is the tile line in this picture?
Right in the center.
Right in the center. Okay. So that's where the drain tile is, because you're seeing that crown. Now, one of the key aspects of being able to design the optimum drainage system is to actually getting rid of that crown shape as you go from that tile line away from that tile line. You want to have uniform height, and that is what you're trying to achieve. Um, as a drainage engineer, if you ask me, if this was a blown soil, I would say, well, maybe 40 foot, 50 foot spacing is optimum spacing. If you go to Ohio Drainage Guide, look at the soil type and look up the drain spacing. Uh, no matter which soil you're talking about, you go to Paulding clays and Whitefield clays, they still have 40 foot as like a recommended drain spacing. And what are you splitting your spacings at now?
Well, ours would be a lot of sixties going to thirties.
60s going to
Because
30s?
back then, they were draining the Puamas years ago on
Yeah.
sixties and
Yeah.
the Blounts on fifties.
Yeah. So part of the reason you're now either seeing the benefit of splitting that spacing from 60 to 30 is, I think, it's not proven. I have no research data to prove this. I think this is the reason: compaction. Okay. It's not necessarily the fact that, oh, your tile drainage is not functioning. As soon as you introduce a perforated drain pipe at 3 feet below surface, drainage is drainage. That soil is going to drain. What is the key factor is the timeliness of that drainage or getting rid of that water. Think about some of the wet springs planting seasons you have had and the desperation you have felt that I need to get out and get that corn planted. Where do you think you would be compacting your soil more? Right above the tile line or right between the tile lines?
Between.
And that's probably part of the reason why we see immediate yield response after splitting the spacing, because you're not just tiling in between those tile lines, you're also alleviating some of the compaction. Now, running a chisel plow versus putting a tile is probably $1,000 difference per acre. Um, so something to think about. I'm not saying don't split the tile spacing. What I'm saying is wait for that drainage system to pay off before you think about investing into new drainage for that same field. And this is kind of the same message I had given last time is I'm not against splitting the tile spacing, but make sure that system has paid off. How do you do that? Think about the payback period. And there is actually a handout I'm going to give you guys. Bruce Clevenger was the other speaker last time I spoke, and he had talked about economics of drainage. He has put that into a payback period calculator that now you can download and do these estimates on your own. So, of course, tile drainage is a blessing. There is a couple side effects. Um, Water quality is on top of everybody's mind right now, whether it's Northwest Ohio with Lake Erie, Scioto going down to Ohio River, and down to the Gulf, where we have the Gulf of America issue in terms of the algal blooms. Nitrogen transport, phosphorus transport from ag landscapes is a big, big, big water quality issue, and this is not on your mind when you're doing your everyday business, but this does affect how you do your business, because you do get called in to do something or you do get incentivized to do something about it. The best way would be to, if someone is paying for you to put a water quality practice out there, but if it helps with your crop yields a little bit, that's a win-win scenario. And we're going to talk about that here shortly. A lot of times the other side effect we're thinking about is the whether or not tile drainage itself contributes to making drought effects even worse. You got rid of water, and then come summer, you're running out of water. Is tile drainage causing you to lose that water? Well, the correct answer is no. Okay? Uh, in a year like 2024 or 2025, did tile drainage make things worse for you? Absolutely not. Go back to your spring months in 2024 and 2025 and you will know why, because you would not have a crop there unless you had tile drainage there. We had wet seasons, we had delayed planting in 24, we had a window in last year 25 that it was just too wet, but it would have remained wet if you did not have functioning tile systems. They did their job. You can't blame the tile system come June, July, and August. It's the weather that is driving the drought and not the tile drainage. So you gotta remember that, because tile drainage is getting the excess water out. It's not stripping soil moisture away from the soils. It's only getting rid of what soils do not store in a natural condition. So if someone says that drainage causes drought, make sure you argue with them on my behalf. Okay? I don't want negative publicity for tile drainage. That will get me out of my job. Um, but it's a reality. Uh, with or without tile drainage, it doesn't matter. What I'm worried about is this not having enough water part, mainly because I feel like for the last several generations, we have not really spent our energy into thinking about it, if that makes sense. If we take you guys from here and put you into Missouri, Mississippi, or Washington, the first thing you would invest into is a center pivot system. Here, I don't think going back 3 generations, 4 generations, anybody actually taught you to think about it, right? So it's a new challenge that you have to think about. So the good news is we are creative. We are very creative in this landscape. And then we have the help from our natural water resources that we can easily leverage without having to spend too much money or energy. And I'll explain that here a little bit. I think this is probably the last few slides before we talk about controlled drainage. This starts in 1895. The graph starts in 1895, goes all the way up to 2023. All the red shading that you see is percent of state of Ohio that has experienced a drought condition. The darker the red color, so from yellow to dark brown, is basically worse and worse drought condition. So a D4 condition means it's basically like 2012. Okay, uh, back in 2024, you guys were in D2-ish by the time you were ready to harvest. Last year, 2025, you were in D3, but that D3 hit when crops were already mature, and yet it didn't affect you as much. Just to kind of give some context, but a D4 would be 2012. But you can see, no matter which year you pick, there is always a red somewhere in the state. But the taller it gets, 100% of the state has a drought condition. So if you want to eyeball 2012 towards the right, you will see that somewhere between 2010 and 15, you see this blue shade. Right after that is 2012. So that's not even the worst drought in the history of Ohio. Isn't that amazing? Well, the main message I want you to take away from this is the below, like the blue shading below it, is percent of state under a wet condition. And that's not news to me. We have known that the entire state has too much water, and we get that. But we have, I don't think we have paid attention to the fact that we always have a drought that exists. So um, this was a surprise to me when I started looking into it and I got the data. I'm like, really, this is the picture, and we don't think about drought as a risk. I think we need to think about it if we want to be more profitable. We are profitable here, but we could beat some of the other states that are probably 40 or 50 bushel above us easily if we think about this. You remember this graph from last time? This shows the water that a grain crop would use. This is for corn. For soybean, it would look very similar. Okay, but the green part is as soon as you get the planting done. So somewhere between April and May, mid-May, you're gonna get the planting done. Then the crop starts growing and it starts pumping water as evapotranspiration. It's using water, uh, making it to evaporate into the atmosphere. So in May, you might be pumping maybe a couple inches in a whole month in terms of evaporation or water use. By the time you get into June, you're looking at about 4 or 5 inches. July and August, your crop needs about 8 inches. That's how thirsty it gets. So between July and August itself, you need 16 inches, right? By the time that crop is done, it has uh, consumed about 28 inches of water. Do you remember the growing season precipitation? I showed you the non-growing season precipitation up to be
Right.
20 inches. And then out of 20 inches, 40 inches, you had 20 inches that was just non-growing season. Growing season, you got 20 inches. What does that tell you?
We don't have enough.
You don't have enough, right? It's as simple a math as it can be. Okay, well, is this affecting our corn and soybean yields? Not in every year. We do okay. We can grow corn with 20 to 24 inches of water. And this is where having the soils that we have is a blessing. Because you go down Scioto, down into Scioto County, just south of Columbus, where you have these soils adjacent to Scioto River that have a lot more sand in them, you'll see center pivot systems as a necessity. Here, we have heavy clay soils, they can retain moisture. You have some carryover moisture from spring and summer, early summer, that stays in that soil. And as the crop is pumping water out, you have some from precipitation, but there is another 3 or 4 inches that we are getting as a bank from the previous season from deep profile that comes up as capillary movement. So imagine the tile drainage system is lowering the water table from closer to surface down to the tile depth. And after that it shuts down, right? Tile drainage cannot drain below where the tile depth is, 3 feet. So at the end of your summer, you have your water table that you have brought down to 3 feet. In July and August, that water table keeps going deep, deep, deep. 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet. But even if it's at 6 feet, there is a water source that is pumping water up through the root zone with capillarity. And that is what gives you that bank that I'm talking about. So that 3 or 4 inches carries over, and then your crops are not suffering as much. That's how the math works for crop water use here in Ohio. Uh, as you can see, the blue line there is basically monthly precipitation, and it clearly shows that in the month of July and August we get 4 inches on average. So we get about 8 inches of rain, but the demand is 16 inches, and that's where the deficit is. So we're dealing with a natural wet condition every season and a natural drought condition every season, and we can still, what is your county average here for corn? What is it, 170?
Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can grow 170 bushel corn with this, imagine what you could do if you could provide that 4 or 5 inches that you need. And that's the value proposition I have, is I think we have a real chance of being more profitable if we can find ways to make more water available to the thirsty crops that we have in July and August. The good news is you don't need it every year. Go back in records and you might see a 250 or 300 bushel year for a specific field because it just rained perfect. Every 2 weeks you had a little shower that was perfect. And that's the beauty, that even if you put a irrigation system there in Ohio, you may not run that irrigation system every year. And that's a saving on energy cost, operational cost. You may not put all 4 or 5 inches that you need every year. That is also a cost saving. If you wanted to grow 300 bushel corn in Nebraska, you need to irrigate 9 inches. If you want to grow that same corn here, that demand has been cut down into 4.5 inches. So that's the advantage there. All right. I think I went too much into the weeds here, but question for you: which one do you think is worse? I think you've seen this illustration that I usually show, that like if you look at the future predictions of weather, how our day-to-day weather would look like, especially during crop growing season. Um, Aaron Wilson, our state climatologist, says that by the end of this century, our summer weather is going to be more like today's Arkansas, hot and dry. Our winter weather is going to be more like today's North Carolina, wet and warm. Okay,
I'm not gonna care about 2095.
you're not gonna care about 2095. Who
I'm
cares?
done.
Yeah.
You'll still be gone.
Honestly, I don't care either because I'll be dead by then. But um,
Wow.
if we think about 2030, that's 3.5 years from now, and you would have shifted into Illinois, southern Illinois, where you see a bunch of center pivot systems, not because of the weather per se, but they have sandy, light textured soils. But hopefully, this puts things in perspective. Who cares if it is climate change or whatever? We're seeing this already. I don't believe in this map more than what you do, but it's already happening. That Arkansas situation is our 2024, our 2025, our 2012s. So if Arkansas starts happening instead of once every decade, 3 times a decade, would you be worried for your farm operation? That's what I'm worried about. I'm not thinking that Ohio is going to be permanently like Arkansas. What I'm worried about is Ohio being like Arkansas more than 2 to 3 times a decade. And then that starts affecting your bottom line. That we need to worry about. Definitely we need to worry about. Okay? We're not prepared for it. Which one is worse, do you think? That wet spring or the hot summer? What do you guys think?
You can't have a hot summer if the spring's too wet.
So you think too much water is definitely the worst?
Yeah, because if I can't get it planted.
If you can't get it planted, there's no crop. I agree. Well, let's see if I can change your mind.
Bang.
You remember that green graph that I showed you that is the crop water use? I'm sure you have a fresh memory from 2012. What was your yield? Do you remember?
No.
You don't want to remember?
It's been too long.
It's been too long. 2012 was the worst year in terms of the drought impacting our crops. And if I'm guessing the yields were very, very low in 2012. And the reason is I kind of scared you by saying drought has existed in Ohio for a long, long time. What I did not tell you, I'm a good salesperson. What I did not tell you is it matters when the drought actually occurs. If the drought occurs in early spring, we usually don't care as much. If the drought occurs in mid July through mid August, we that hits us pretty bad because those are reproductive stages. And agronom, this is proven in Nebraska and all over the country where they do irrigation research that the most sensitive or susceptible crop phase is the reproductive crop growth phase for water scarcity, like the drought condition. So every day that corn did not have enough water during the reproductive stages, R1 to whatever, a couple phases after that, you're looking at about a 6 bushel yield hit every day. Uh, doesn't keep adding up, but it's a significant yield loss if the drought hits during reproductive stages. Now look at 2012, and you can answer that question yourself.
Yeah.
You see the July and August being the peak demand months, and the majority of state was in at least a D1 and D2, if not D3 and D4.
But it did start raining in early August in 12.
And it was probably too late.
But yeah, it was, everything was so
Yeah,
stressed before that.
yeah,
Where last year, rain didn't start till the end of it.
exactly. Yeah. But last year you had above average rain in July, which actually helped you. We had 7, 8 inches of rain in central Ohio.
It stopped right there.
And it stopped, but that July moisture carried you through the completely dry August and some change. And that's why you don't see a big. How was the yield last year for 2025?
Surprising.
Surprising, right?
But it still was probably.
Yeah.
Not what, it looked like early.
No, no, we lost a lot of,
We lost.
You
lost a
did?
lot of top end, but
You did.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
from what we could have had, I mean, we were set for,
Yeah, it looked good.
we could have knocked the tops off. I
Can
mean,
you not think of your July memory?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we got dry right then.
Yeah, when
We
you're
were
driving around in
yeah,
July, it would look like your best year,
yeah,
but that's not the case because in August the
yeah,
faucet turned off. Yeah, I agree with that. So you still kind of came back to your average yield,
oh, yeah.
or are you still kind of above your average? Because we have some
Well,
counties in Ohio, they had the best yield.
Yeah.
we were far from the best because
Yeah.
we had so much of ours was determined on planting date.
Hmm.
You know, the early windows planted,
Yeah.
and then when we, you know, we'd be out and come back in, then we were fighting later planting.
Hmm.
And as we could pretty much see a, you know,
Mm.
planting date, especially on the soybean side and
Yeah.
the corn side, it was Mother's Day was the home run, and you know, it was just kind of that way from both days.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Those the fields that got planted early got the benefit of that moisture from July. The fields that got planted late
yeah,
then
we're
suffered a little with the
yeah,
drought last year. Okay, let's come back to this graph. Talking about 2012, look at 2011. That is like a good example for that once in a decade kind of a wet condition that you could have. 2011 is it wasn't as bad as 2019 where you couldn't plant. Early on in 2011 most everyone could plant, but we had just too much water all throughout the growing season, and that's very evident. Like, would you worry about July and August in this kind of a weather? No. All right, 2013 is almost like a, if you were to look at 30-year average for Ohio, I would call 2013 as like the average year, most representative year. I'm going to show you a map of Ohio's precipitation in those 3 years. 150% of 30-year normal in 2011, 75% of 30-year normal in 2012, and 100% in Northwest Ohio. You guys are kind of on the border here, but 100% of 30-year normal uh, for 2013. So, do you think this is a good example if we were to think about which one is worse, drought or wet condition? All right, this is by state. This is for the whole state. Okay, I just went into the NAS data. I said, what is the state average for corn yield in 2013, which is my normal? And you said your county average may be hovering around 170. So does the state average, 174 in 2013, 120 bushel in 2012, 153 bushel in 2011. Okay, 50% wetter, 25% drier. Where do you see the largest contrast or the yield hit?
too dry.
Too dry. 54 bushel yield hit in 2012, but only 20 bushel yield hit when you have too much water. This is where I am assured that my job is secure because we do have the drainage systems that actually keep you profitable no matter which year. I had a slide that I had shown last time that drainage takes risk out of your farm operation with respect to too much water. No matter which year it is, you have more consistent yields. This is a good example where, because a lot of our corn acreage is drained, no matter how wet that condition is, it doesn't hit us as bad. Do we have any contingency on drought? We don't. Okay, I've made my point. All right. Uh, I, you don't have to believe what I'm gonna show you this in this slide. I don't know if it goes back. It's not gonna go back, but let's use some fancy computer models to show. Um, you remember that Arkansas situation? So we have a way to kind of generate data for future and run it through a complicated model that will predict the crop yield for the whole state, and it looks bad. It looks like 2012 all over for future. Okay, that's that doesn't mean you're not going to be able to be profitable. You'll still make sure that you do everything possible to maintain and increase your yields. I don't think um, farming is a business, and you wouldn't want to go into like a loss in future. So we will adapt. I'm not worried about it. How we will adapt is the question. So making how do we make water available? I think the lowest hanging fruit is to rely on that same drainage system that we have to get rid of water, and we use that drainage system to actually make more water available. So that's kind of the idea with controlled drainage. Can drain tiles help us store? You remember that banking of water I was talking about? Can we store a little more water in the soil, or can we use reverse drainage to actually um, instead of using a center pivot, we use reverse drainage to irrigate. And that way, you're not investing another $1,500 an acre on an overhead irrigation system. But you could do that only in flat landscape. I guess you already know that.